everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. I am Zanetta Kelsey, and thank you so much for being here. We have a few more people that will be coming into the room, so I'm not going to be like at church where we're like, slide into the middle so people can find their way. They can find their way. So, Zanetta Kelsey, I am the CEO of Access Mode, which is a new nonprofit here in Colorado to help Black, Latino, Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Indigenous founders grow and scale their business. We're all about cultivating innovation. And so I have my esteemed panelists here with us today to talk about funding Black founders, because we have a real issue here in the US and beyond. And so this is an important conversation for Denver Startup Week, and we're glad that you guys are here to join us. We'll spend about 50 minutes on content and then open it up for Q&A. We want to continue this conversation online and make sure that everyone is getting their questions answered and that we're sharing this information that we talk about here with the broader community. So what I'll ask you to do is, if you have a question, even if you raise your hand to ask it, which we want you to do, would you go on to accessmode.org and also enter your question there so that we can create a Google Sheet, and we will be sharing out those answers going forward, and also invite you to online events that we have where we will continue the conversation. All right, well, without further ado, I will ask my panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll hop into this great conversation.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dejan Smith. I'm from the Windy City of Chicago, and I co-lead Accenture's Black Founders Development Program. So my main job is to help Black founders get the 2 C's that they care about: cash and contracts.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Pigas. I'm the Managing Director for Techstars Atlanta, powered by JP Morgan. We invest in underrepresented founders who are building the future of commerce, technology, consumer brands, and the creator economy.
Hi, I'm David Mandel from right here in Boulder, Colorado. I am a multi-time founder and operator, started and sold 3 different companies. And most recently, I'm a full-time investor through 2 different vehicles, one called the Fund Rockies, where we use pre-seed checks for companies that have at least one founder based in the Rockies region. And my other more full-time gig is a company, a venture firm I started 2 years ago called Massive, and we invest later stage and through the entire business lifecycle.
Hey everyone, my name is Nehemiah Green. I lead global partnerships for the underrepresented founder team at AWS. Really excited to be here. I've been with AWS for about a year now, and our team specifically helps underrepresented founders through the growth and life cycle of their business. We establish partnerships, build programs specifically for underrepresented founders. I'm glad to talk about that more today.
Great, thank you. So as you can see on this panel, we have founder representation, VC representation, and corporate representation, and then of course Access Mode as nonprofit technical assistance and support. So really trying to cover the gambit of what is out there to help founders grow and scale. So let's get into it, Dejan. Accenture, as he mentioned, with the company that he's with, put out some research in 2020 around the growing gap for Black founders and accessing funds and capital. Can you talk to us a little bit about that research and what you're seeing out in the marketplace?
Yeah, so Accenture has been operating in so many different spaces. A lot of people don't know. We're basically the size of a small country. We have 780,000 employees globally, and we work in a plethora of different spaces. But Accenture Ventures, the part of the team that I'm a part of, was created several years ago to invest in the startup ecosystem. We've been doing that for quite some time, Series A and above. But in 2020, we realized a lot was happening, obviously with George Floyd and so much happening in our marketplace, that Accenture wanted to do more to support Black founders, specifically in North America, and as the program has expanded more globally. So we did some research between 2016 and 2020 to really get hyper-focused on the funding gap between Black founders and non-Black founders, and obviously found some very interesting things. You know, less than 8 Black founders have made it past Series D. So when you think about funding today, the majority of the funding comes after Series A, when you're getting $50 million, $100 million at these crazy valuations. If not many Black founders are getting it past Series A, or sorry, not getting seed to Series A, then that's where the huge funding parity really begins. And what is that? What's happening in the marketplace right now? So our research showed there was probably $65 billion in lost economic opportunity by the community not investing in black founders specifically. In addition to that, when you think about the average net worth of households, it was like a 7x difference between black household and non-white and white households, because when you think about it, you make a business, hopefully it grows, you IPO, you get acquired, you make money, you can invest in other companies as well and continue to build your net worth. If black founders are missing out on this one huge economic driver and wealth builder in our nation outside of real estate, that's really going to have huge implications on the community. And then obviously conversations around diverse-led firms leading to higher returns. And if we're not focusing money into these spaces, then that's just not going to happen. So Accenture was really hyper-focused on this. So in 2020, September, Accenture was like, we're going to launch a founders program for black founders specifically, because our research shows that they're still getting 1% of VC funds. We need to make sure that they're operating in all spaces. We're hyper-focused on enterprise tech, but Accenture was like, we have to do something. We are a CVC with client relationships across the Fortune 500. We have influence, so we need to do something in this space. And I was really excited because Accenture called out one particular group that has seen a lot of systemic issues within our nation, that they said, hey, yes, we want to support all minorities and all gender groups, but specifically Accenture said in 2020 and beyond, we want to focus on black founders and see how we can move the needle as a CVC, which is just one small piece of the financing space as it relates to entrepreneurs.
1% of venture has gone to black founders consistently over time.
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah.
Not 2, 20,
Yep.
1. Okay, just checking. Okay, so Melissa, we hear all of this information from Dejan about what Accenture published as their research, and we will be sharing that link with you all. If you go to accessmode.org and enter your information, happy to share that out. You have helped 8, 9+ companies. You've been an operator. You've helped them IPO, grow, scale. You're now leading this incredible accelerator in Atlanta and beyond. Tell us what you are seeing related to this research.
When we talk to founders, for example, we just launched our first class this September, and when we talked to founders who had applied for the program and asked about their funding journey relative to other classes that have gone through Techstars, what we found was actually incredible. Most of them were bootstrapped, right? They, instead of having early friends and family checks, they actually relied on the revenue from their customers, which revenue is great. It serves as market validation. It means they get to keep the equity, but it was also because that really was their only option. And so what we're seeing is, while they've been able to retain more ownership for the business themselves, it has prevented them from being able to go as quickly as they would like. They have to make concessions about how they grow and scale their technology. I think that while the ecosystem is growing and there's certainly a lot of helpers out there, they also fall prey to what I would say are bad actors that come in the form of debt funding, some crowdfunding platforms, and that's how we see predatory platforms really reaching out and growing based on the needs of these founders. And so our hope is to really be that rising tide in venture capital, not only because we see really strong returns coming from these businesses, but that multiplier effect is that when these founders grow and scale their businesses and have these exits, they become the next round of angel investors within their communities. And in doing so, we're really hoping that this rising tide of venture can truly lift all boats, especially the diverse ones.
Yeah. So you're talking about this rising tide. Dejan's talking about kind of this wealth cycle of getting into business, being able to grow, scale, and then invest, and kind of continuing that loop.
I'll say the other thing that I'll add, so in addition to being a startup operator, I also spent a good chunk of my career as an early stage investor. And when I look at the spread of startups that we have in class, for example, but I think it was by line share a large part of the applicant, they were all in market with product and traction and no venture funding to speak of. And my experience as a traditional institutional venture capital investor is we'd written much bigger check sizes into founders that had come through investment committee that had an idea on a slide, maybe. And so that's where we start seeing the stark disparity. It's not that these are not businesses that are viable and have traction and proof points and are going to grow into being the big economic anchors of their communities. There was something else that was amiss, and that's part of what we're working to change through the program with Techstars and our ecosystem partners like Access.
Thank you for that. So you're talking about this challenge to get into and off the ground, into businesses that can grow and scale. And help us understand. So we had a dinner last night where we had several Black founders who were in attendance, and they shared some of the challenges that they are facing. Can you guys articulate what you heard last night? And is this something not just kind of specific to Denver? Is it something that you're seeing across the U.S.? I'll start with you, Nehemiah.
Sure. I think, coming out of the pandemic, I think one of the things that we've heard from founders is, connecting with other founders, right? Community. I think it can be incredibly hard to raise capital. We talked about mental health right before this, but doing it in isolation, I think, compounds many of those struggles. So I think that's one of the things that came up out of our conversation last night is continuing these conversations that I think, one, educate, two, provide better opportunities to advise, and then last, I think the most important, because this was the structure of our dinner, better kind of concerted efforts that bring together investors and founders, right? Kind of going beyond just the mentorship model, but really kind of putting your mouth where you say it's going to be. Like, you're going to basically make sure that founders are getting capital. So, that's something that I think that's been top of mind for me, and I think we'd love to hear other thoughts as well.
So another thing that we discussed at dinner is for our founders who are able to raise capital, we also noticed that they raise at lower valuations relative to their peers. So not only do we want to make sure that we're building community and sharing data points to help others understand how they navigate the world of venture capital, but make sure that their valuations, their rounds, that they are being equitably assessed relative to their peers.
Yeah, and another thing, just putting that together, I think the access to privileged information to hopefully grow your business. I think a good combination for any entrepreneur is being a triple threat as it relates to business, tech, and law. Because if you can understand that final piece of law and how it can affect the commercialization of your innovation, how you may or may not get screwed over when you're accepting venture capital dollars, how you might be able to be voted out when you're giving up board seats, that those economics and control that I think a lot of people don't have or not privy to that information, or boiling it down to weekend language so that they do understand it because they're just trying to get to a check and get to profitability and continue to have that product market fit. But I think that was probably one key challenge area is like that access to privileged information. How do I navigate a VC versus a CVC? How do I get just traditional funding from a bank and making sure that they're looking at actual metrics that are related to my business and not how I present physically. So I think that was maybe one of the key challenge areas that I heard last night.
Do you all think that there are enough technical supports out there? I mean, Access Mode is new. We're taking in 5 companies launching next month. That's 5 companies, right? So we're new. We can only do what we can do. Is there enough assistance out there for the ecosystem? David, I'm going to throw that to you first.
No. Flat out no. There's not enough information. There's not enough support. There's not enough infrastructure for founders of color. And that's one of the biggest challenges is people that look like me have much bigger established network when they're doing things like this. They have people that have gone through it to ask questions. They have people that to explain it's like, no, you don't structure your business like that. That's not going to get you funded. That's going to get you in trouble. And so that's one of the biggest problems is just the language, right? And when we see deals, there's a huge gap in the language used between white founders and founders of color and how they're talking about their business, how they're pitching their business. There's a huge gap in which founders understand how venture actually works. which is critical, right? Because venture is not going to change until someone forces them to change, right? And there's a lot of talk around, well, is the venture industry going to get more serious about founders of color? And the flat answer is no, until someone forces them to, right? Like as an entrepreneur, I can tell you no industry will change until they're either getting their lunch eaten from the bottom or their customers are telling them to fucking change. And they don't change out of the goodness of their heart. And so what we need is a lot more infrastructure at the bottom, giving more information. And I know there's this whole over-mentored, underfunded theme, which I totally understand. But what we need to get more specific around is it the right mentoring, right? Are they getting the right information around? Are they getting attorneys involved immediately? Do they understand how venture capitalists actually work so they can speak their language, right? So when they get into a meeting, the venture capitalist understands like, oh, I can put this in a category that works or doesn't work for me. I can assess this against my other deal flow. I can understand what my potential return is. And I can plug this into my machine that I have built that I'm not going to change unless I have to. It's also not going to change until the LPs, who are the people that fund venture capitalists, start saying, no, I need to see more diversity in your portfolio or you're not getting my money. Right, so there's a huge gap at both stages, or I should say both at the top and the bottom. I think the bottom is getting better, slowly, way too slowly, but it's getting there. I mean, we need much more programs like you guys are doing at Techstars and like you're doing here, just to understand the industry and understand how to navigate the industry and understand how to speak their language and understand what they care about and whether or not you should even get venture funding for your company, which is a whole another topic. And then I think the top has to change where you need to start seeing more LPs saying, I am not investing in your next fund until I see a much more diverse portfolio.
So we're talking about things that we're seeing as challenges for the founder, for the Black founder today. And you start talking about things that we're seeing at the funding levels. You know, from my perspective, I attended the Colorado Venture Summit in May or June. And I was the only person of color at the Colorado Venture Summit during the time that I was there, and I was there for about 6 hours. It was a speed dating round between venture and founders. And there were no founders of color the entire time I was there for 6 hours. So you talk about infrastructure, but you also are talking about access. And I went around speed dating. I'm not looking for money from venture necessarily, but I wanted to have a conversation. So I was like, hey, I'm going to take these speed dating meetings and I'm going to ask these guys, all of them but one were guys, these white guys, hey, do you understand what's happening with Black founders and what's your perspective? Most of them gave me the answer of, we can't find Black founders. How many of you have heard that? Some head shaking, hands raising. We can't find Black founders, so we can't find them. And then the second answer was they aren't prepared. What do you think, David, is the issue that venture has around Black founders?
I think there's a lot of issues, right? And the first and foremost is that we live in an incredibly systemic racist organization, right? Like the whole industry from the beginning was set up that way. So we need to break down that infrastructure to provide better access. I think the other problem is, like many other people, VCs are inherently lazy. And if they're making money and doing their job and they're returning good returns to their LPs and their LPs are going to give them more money, they're going to keep doing what they've been doing until they're forced to change. So while I understand it's easy to target the industry and say, you guys need to fucking change, it's more important to understand they're not going to change until someone makes them change. And so we need, like I said, the forces at the top of the bottom to get more founders of color to understand, no, you should be at these events and you should show up and you should talk and you should learn. And you should find people that can help you understand how to pitch your business and help you understand how to talk the language of the people you want to get money from. We also need LPs to start funding more funds that are specifically focused on founders of color. And unfortunately, I think what we've seen over the past 8 months to a year, just with this whole pullback in the industry, and this is horrible, but I know at least 4 different funds that are focused specifically on founders of color that are not going to close their funds because when the industry got tight, all the LPs pulled back, and they all of a sudden reassessed capital to the things they know, because they were scared. So there's a real challenge, but I think that the biggest thing that people in this room can do is show up, learn how to talk the right language, get people that can really help you understand what matters to an investor. So when you sit down, you're automatically talking their language, and you're showing them why the fuck they should invest. Like, here's a real business here. Like, I'm going to give you a return. Here's how the return works. Here's the investment. Here's how, like, you know, read venture deals. Understand how this industry really works. Because the more information and the smarter the founders sound, the harder it's going to be to ignore them. And so, yeah, I think there's issues at every level, right? But it doesn't mean there's only one we should be attacking. We should be attacking all of them and just keep chipping away.
And on the note of speaking the language of venture capital, how many people have read or heard of Venture Deals?
You guys know that book?
If you haven't, we've turned the book into a free online course. It's an ongoing module. And so that's one easy tactical way. If you're like, I want to be able to command the conversation with investors that I'm going to speak to, it's the grail for very much of the industry. So that's a great way to start to educate and inform yourself.
It's a great resource. Thank you for that tip.
And we'll link to it as well through Access Mode.
That's right. So, you know, David's talking about things changing at the bottom, changing at the top, and founders of color, Black founders showing up at these events. What if they don't know about these events? It's been elusive to a lot of people who are trying to start businesses, where to go. What are some of your suggestions for that?
Yeah, I would definitely say, you know, a lot of these entrepreneur-serving organizations that are propping up across the nation are definitely key to, as I said earlier, disseminating this privileged information to the masses. Access Mode, I know another organization called Prosperity Now that's on a mission to support 1 million BIPOC founders through partnerships with like Microsoft and Accenture and others. So I think it's really tapping into those entrepreneur-serving organizations like Techstars and others to find out when these events are, how much do they cost, can they get funded? Big tech companies all the time sponsor some of these events. How can we give out free tickets so that people have access to the room? And then once they're in the room, they can work the room themselves. But I think that's probably one of the main things is tapping into these entrepreneur-serving organizations within your respective communities to at least know what's out there.
I would say another thing that I've noticed that's, I think, a little different within the underrepresented investor community is them actually being a resource to underrepresented founders, right? So I'll be in San Diego tomorrow for the Latitude Conference, which is a very substantial, very well-known Latinx conference for founders. And there's plenty others around the country. But I think them providing mentorship and providing access to kind of networking events has also been something that's been probably helpful in making sure that they're connected to the right people and also other founders so that they're able to accelerate.
Great.
Yeah.
So, Melissa, this question is for you. David touched on this around this upcoming economic recession. Since in June 2022, so first half of this year, 100 Black founders have received early stage funding from VCs, which is a change, but 100 in comparison to the majority culture. With this upcoming recession and the recession already that's the pullback that David's talking about with venture, what do you recommend for Black founders right now?
The good news for Black founders is that they have always been able to make do with a little, right? They are scrappy and innovative and know how to extend runway. And so I think that's a real skill. When we talk to our founders about extending their runway, they're like, look, we didn't have the funding in the first place, and our customers are largely what funds our business. So, I think it's really having a good handle on your P&L, knowing what are the different levers that are going to impact your business, how to extend runway, understanding the different resources at your disposal. So if you're in the consumer goods space, how do you think about your cash conversion cycle? How do you think about raising money from venture as well as non-dilutive funding? Also grants as well. And we talked to them about, as they look forward to the different milestones for their business, how they can do different scenario planning. And so, yes, there has been a pullback in investment. We saw that earlier this year, but the good news is, as we at least speak to investors in our network, they very much expect that they're going to start doing deals and writing checks in 2023. If anything, investors are waiting and saying, we're going to get some good deals because we know that we're going to get great values on deals because there's this deflation in valuations. So our message to founders is to stay scrappy, stay the course, and understand your options.
So, Dejan, you've been working in this space for a while now, and Melissa's talking about being gritty, which is what founders of color know how to do, because they live a life of trying to make sure that they're extending every resource they can. What are some things that you're seeing founders do to be scrappy and gritty if they're not going the VC route?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about earlier, sometimes the predatory platforms, not all, but like crowdfunding platforms to get access to capital through their own community, because, our research showed when you look at how you start a business, you bootstrap, family and friends around, then hopefully some angel investors seed and go on. But if you look at the net worth of black families versus non-black families, a lot of people don't have a family and friends round that they can tap into. So they're looking to these other sources of income to come in. Great things that I've at least been seeing to sort of help black businesses and other minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. Companies like Meta. I don't know, does anyone know about the fast invoicing program that Meta offers? So if you are a women-owned business, minority-owned business, LGBTQ-owned business, or veteran-owned business, they have $100 million that they've been funneling through this program. So if you have customers, you get net payment terms, net 30, net 15, net 60, net 120. Meta will pay it net now, so next day, so that you can help with your cash flow for your business, which is amazing. A lot of people didn't know about that, but this is something that they're trying to do to help minority-owned businesses as one, help with their cash flow so they can run their business and be scrappy and not wait 60 days to get a payment from one of their, enterprise clients, which I think is huge. But also, that technology is powered by a black-owned business, which a lot of people didn't know, and a lot of people weren't using it until Meta used its brand name to help accelerate them moving forward. So seeing things like that. Beta Bank Services, an individual who was a former Amazon employee, he basically created this new algorithm and platform that would help banks provide small business loans to entrepreneurs, looking at everything around the business and not the actual person, not your gender, not your race, your credit score, anything like that, but just the business that you're operating in. And I love seeing things like that, data-driven ways to get entrepreneurs the capital that they need to launch and grow their businesses. That's kind of separating some of the implicit and explicit bias that has been ingrained in our system for so very long. So hearing about things like that, Beta Bank Services, Meta's fast invoicing program, entrepreneurs tapping into the grants and the non-dilutive funding that is out there, and just by any means necessary signing up for every pitch competition to get $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 have been things that I've seen so far. The founders just saying, look, I'm going to get this money any way I can.
Yeah. You bring up a good point, and I hadn't thought about this, so this is on the spot, but hackathons used to be really popular, and then the pandemic. So getting into a room and kind of grinding out for a day, couple of days, and being able to work in teams and that kind of thing. Any value still in that?
Yeah, or I'll say I have a quick anecdote. One woman in Atlanta, Barbara Jones, do you know her? Okay, she is retail fraud guru. She has been in the industry for 20 plus years. She's a veteran, and she went to a hackathon and came up with this beautiful idea, ran it, won $6,000. She still has this check. Every time you hop on a call with her, you see this big check for $6K. Went to VCs. Everyone looked down at her like, oh, wait, that's never going to be a business, blah, blah, blah. And she was so discouraged, but she was like, this hackathon, this was true value. Everyone in the retail industry loved this. Anyway, fast forward, she ended up going to black women in Birmingham and raising like $6 million for her business. But it all started from her going to this hackathon and seeing some solutions or seeing some problems in the marketplace that she had the expertise in. And that $6,000 was the seed and the motivator and the fire that led her to, even though she put it on pause for about a year, she came back to it and realized like, hey, look, I built something, and I think this needs to be in the market. And Nordstrom and all these other clients are now starting to buy her retail fraud solution. But to your point around hackathons, I think they're still very valuable in a quick way to really show how quickly we can come up with solutions in 24 hours and then create a whole business on that is venture backable.
Yeah, I love hackathons. How many of you have done a hackathon before? Just a few? Yeah, okay, we might
Quite a
bring it
technical
back.
thing too. If you're
Yeah.
not a technical
Yeah,
founder,
that's
that's a
true.
hard
Yes.
thing to get involved in. But
Yeah.
The other thing I'll add is that in our industry, serendipity is very important for investors, for funders, for LPs, and so hackathons are just another great way of broadening your network and meeting other people who can support you on your journey. One of the big asks I hear from founders that I talk to all the time is, I'm having trouble finding, I need a technical co-founder. I need help hiring an engineer. And we know that it's really difficult to compete with a lot of the Fortune 500 salaries that they're extending to engineers. And so one of the great ways to meet people and find out if they're aligned with your mission is showing up to hackathons, building relationships with people, talking to them about the tech that you're building. And sometimes you'll get great advice on maybe how to right size your tech stack, or maybe you can use no-code platforms to get you to a certain point. And so I think hackathons are important, especially as you're trying to build your technical network. If this is not something you already have, you're literally going to an event in a space where people want to help you with the technical aspects of your business, and it's always a good thing to leave room for serendipity.
So
And
they're gonna-
also, startup weekends.
yeah,
Hackathons are highly technical, but startup weekends are very
general.
fast.
So if I could,
Yeah.
starting and founding a business is one of the single hardest things a human can do. If you haven't done it, you have no idea how lonely and hard it is. Sometimes the only way to get out of that lonely circle is to be able to talk to other people that are doing similar things. Now, I was lucky enough to be part of, or even in Boulder before the tech community really started in Boulder, and was lucky enough to have been part of watching that community grow. And in fact, we hosted the very first startup weekend in our office, so that shows you how crazy old I am, right? But one of the things that helped that community grow so quickly was founders got together, and founders talked, and founders realized that they were not alone being scared shitless, that everyone was scared, and they started to help each other, and they started to understand, like, wait a minute, I'm not the only one dealing with this. I dealt with that, here's how it works, you should do this. But these are people that have actually gone through it and are going through it. And there's an incredible power in that, which is why things like Techstars are so powerful, and hackathons and startup weeks and startup weekends. There are some amazing founders of color out there now that are actually starting to make real progress. I mean, I can name several off the top of my head. Find people that have gone through it. I'm not talking about just lighthearted mentors that want to help out of the goodness of their heart. I'm like, find people that have actually gone through this shit, and they understand the challenge, and they're willing to help you, not because they're going to get equity in your company, or not because they're going to get paid, but because they care. And the more people like that you can find, the easier it is to keep yourself going, to understand things you need to rethink through when you're talking or pitching or getting out there, and build community, real community, because that is really what helps, because it's such a fucking lonely thing. And you're scared to admit that you're scared until you're actually talking to other people that have gone through it. So hopefully that's helpful. I know you wanted to say something.
No, I'll just add one more point on the hackathons, and maybe other programs too, that all aren't created equal, right? There's some great hackathons, and there's some great programs, and there's ones that are kind of less savory. I think that Dejan and what the work that he's doing with his program and the VC fund is incredible. I think there's programs as well, like Access Mode and others, that are really intentional and really focused on supporting underrepresented founders. There might be others where there's some signals of you have to like pay into a hackathon, or there's like a general pot. Like, definitely avoid those, but definitely lean towards the ones where there's incredible access to maybe solutions architects, or there's experts that can really help you drive and accelerate your business. But definitely hackathons are definitely something I would encourage you.
Excellent. So David, this question is for you. As we're talking about, you talked about finding a mentor or finding people that have actually been through this.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're doing at Access Mode is we host community meetups. How many of you have been to Access Mode community meetups before? A couple people in here. And we do this a few times a year with meetups so that we're getting founders in spaces talking to other founders of color. Not just black founders, but founders of color. As we start this program with our new cohort, we have people saying, hey, I would love to mentor some of your folks. How important do you think it is to have DEI training for mentors, for white male mentors, before they enter spaces with our founders?
I don't know is the answer, because everybody's different, right? And it can't hurt. It certainly may help a lot. I'm sorry, can you guys hear me? It certainly may help.
And that mic, by the way.
Yeah, it's just for the camera. It certainly may help. I think it's more important to filter for empathy and understanding and lack of ego, and understand that it's very hard for white founders to put themselves in other people's shoes sometimes, but that's really what's critical, right? I mean, like I'm also a CEO coach, and I've coached several black founders, female founders, right? And the empathy part is what's critical. And it's understanding that you may not know exactly what they're going through, but you have to be willing to listen and understand before you can help. And I don't know if DEI training does that. I've unfortunately have yet to see very effective DEI training. I'm not saying it's not out there, I'm just saying I haven't seen it. But I think, screening with you guys first is really important, getting them to understand the goal here. But that's a real challenge, right? I mean, understanding other people's context and having empathy around different experiences is a challenge for any human. So anything you can do to help accelerate that is super important.
I'll expand on the mentor front. So having mentors are very important. Having mentors that come from different walks of life, having mentors that have access that you don't have is critical. It's been really critical for me in my career. At Techstars, we have a mentor-driven program. So there's a big chunk of our program, Mentor Madness, is synonymous with Techstars. And it's really important, and the onus is on those of us who operate those programs to make sure that we are taking the time to serve as that first gate for the mentors. So to do the interviews and understand, why do you want to mentor startups? I've spoken to tons of mentors that want to mentor startups so they can say they are a Techstars mentor.
Yeah.
And to also ask the question of, what is the experience and credibility that you bring as a mentor? Because when I look at the roster of some of our founders, they should be mentoring you and not the other way around. And so there's a responsibility for those of us that operate programs and spaces in the ecosystem to interview and gauge and filter through the helpers. So we talked about good actors and bad actors in the ecosystem. And I think also to put parameters. So mentorship is not a natural inclination. It's not a natural skill that we have. So I think going, even in addition to DEI training, which may be helpful for some mentors, but to help them understand, what does it mean to be a good mentor? And what specifically are your skills that should be leveraged in that process?
And one more key point, shut me down if you want, but one more key point on, it's just a sticking point for me. Talking to the founders. One of the most important things founders can understand about mentorship and mentorship-driven programs and community is that you don't have to do what they say. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, it's just a data point, right? They may be right, they may be wrong. You're going to get that from investors, you're going to get it from mentors. Like, it's your job as a founder to just filter all of that and then make your own decisions. It's your company, not theirs. They may have really good insight. They may not know what the fuck they're talking about, right? But they are just data, hopefully helpful data. But it's your job to realize, this is my business. I now have a data set that I can use to filter through and use to make decisions. But don't ever think you just have to do what somebody says because they're a mentor.
Yeah, I love that empowerment. That is so important for you all in the room who are founders to remember that. Nehemiah, I'm going to pivot this a little bit to large tech companies. So Jean spoke about being the size of a small company at Accenture, small country at Accenture, and oh my gosh, Amazon, right? So can you help us understand why, we talked about founders, we've talked about VC, let's talk about corporates. Why is it important, why is it critical for large tech companies to focus on Black founders?
Well, one thing I can do first is provide some context into AWS. This is information I didn't know before I started, right? So AWS basically helps startups scale their business quickly with cloud services, with infrastructure that might be focused on artificial intelligence, storage. And our goal as a team is to support those founders, accelerate them, make sure that they not only have the right services, but augment, right, with partnerships and programs that really support the establishment and the growth of their startup. Now, our work as a business development team really focuses on establishing partnerships. Those partnerships include investors, they include Techstars and accelerators, right, to identify and find the most promising startups in the world. I think if we recognize that there's bias, right, in this ecosystem, there's going to be a huge gap in terms of the folks that we're able to identify and support. So, our focus at AWS for the past few years has been, creating strategies to help not only fill those gaps, to identify underrepresented founders so that we can make sure that they are getting funded and they are getting past the, I think you said only 8 have passed the Series D and beyond, Black founders. That's crazy, right? I think the power of AWS and Amazon as a whole is being able to partner with startups and essentially get them to scale quickly. I mean, we're a huge company and have offices and have engineers all across the globe. So I think, whether it be Amazon, Google, Apple, Dell, you name it, right? There's some opportunity there in terms of leveraging their superpower and their engineers and their technology, partnering and supporting underrepresented founders and helping them scale, right, to huge economies of scale.
One other point as well from the corporate side and even Accenture, as I said earlier, small country. We do strategy and consulting work for every industry that you could possibly think of. We're working in cosmetics, we're working in utilities, energy, oil and gas, public sector. If we're not finding Black founders that are innovating, creating new service opportunities, new innovations that would help us to better serve the communities that Accenture's clients work for, we're missing out on the opportunity, like I mentioned earlier, $65 billion of opportunity. Thinking about helping Mondelez come up with new Oreo flavors, but if we don't know, a certain group or segment says, hey, yeah, we want a Nutella flavor, because we don't look at them, then we're losing out on a huge opportunity. So for us as well, having our footprint in literally everywhere, being the largest digital ad agency, I didn't even know that for a while. But big corporates work in so many different areas, serving so many different communities across the value chain. So if we're not finding diverse founders that are out there in the marketplace, helping us find new white space opportunity, we're just doing a disservice to everyone in society.
Mm-hmm. So sounds like, you both mentioned this opportunity, and corporate sometimes looks at, and I come from a corporate background too, how do you grow and scale? And we're thinking about, in the tech space in particular, getting to unicorn status, getting these big valuations, growing these huge companies. That's important, but Melissa, I'll ask you, unicorns, but what about the gazelles? I like to talk about the gazelles, right? How important are they to the ecosystem? Those companies that are able to grow and be just sustainable. They don't have to grow to the $1 billion. How important are they to the ecosystem?
They're incredibly important. Before there were these high growth venture funded companies, there were the companies that make up Main Street. And they are self-sustaining. They grow based on the revenue from their customers. And they were the origin stories for all of the big Fortune 500s that we have today. And right now, venture capital is very in vogue. But I hope that it doesn't become synonymous with what it means to be an entrepreneur. Because you can be an entrepreneur and have a self-sustaining business and never need or take $1 venture capital, and that's fine. And there are resources out there for entrepreneurs. There are your local SBAs. There are tons of local organizations like Access Mode as well that help entrepreneurs grow their business. And so, these are important businesses. They actually, if you think about a lot of the venture funded companies, they are there to create services that actually support the growth and scaling of the gazelles.
Right. Yeah, and here in Colorado, there are so many different places to get that support and that help. As founders of color, in particular Black founders, there's Energize Colorado, this year. There are the chambers, there's Access Mode, there's BBI, there's SistaBiz. I can, go down the list, Latino, LLI, Latino Leadership Institute. So there's so many of those organizations that are here in Colorado. We can also include that in the information that we share out. So I know we need to get to some Q&A, but before we do that, we shared a lot about the challenges that Black founders are facing. And it's significant, so we need to talk about it. But we also, are we seeing things change? Are there anything that we can leave with this audience to be encouraging, and any advice that we can share to help them kind of as they're going along their founder journey, or thinking, maybe a couple people are thinking of starting a business?
One of the things that stood out to me over the years, especially recently, if I reflect over the course of my own career, there has never been more individuals, more organizations, more spaces that founders can find where individuals show up, like in this room, and we all want to help. We want to be a part of the conversation to change that tide. There are initiatives to help fund and Black founders to help them grow. And so the challenges are real, but I am heartened by the fact that every day, month, week, and year, I hear of a new organization, a new initiative. I meet a new investor that's like, I am here to help.
Yeah, that's great. And I think about my father. He's no longer with us, but he was one of the first Black database engineers at NIH. And I think about how that has changed in terms of the number of engineers that we have that are Black. I think about this panel, right? Like David, when you started out in startups, eons ago.
Back in the Stone Age. Yeah.
You wouldn't have had panelists that are representing the various different entities that we're representing.
Not even close.
So are things changing?
They are changing. I mean, they're changing slowly, but they're changing. The last 6 or 8 months in the economic industry, I think, have made it harder, but they're definitely changing. And we're also at a crossroads politically, which has a huge impact on the ability of founders of color to raise money and succeed. Right? And there's a lot going on in our world right now that could tip the scales either way. But they're definitely changing, and it's getting much better. It should just be going a lot fucking faster. But it's work.
Nehemiah.
I think there's several trends that are happening. I think one is a shift from thinking that DAI is kind of fluffy and a good thing to do to like there's real business opportunity in investing in founders, right? I think that is just a fundamental shift that I'm seeing in the investor side. Founders are seeing it, so I think it's huge compared to 5-6 years ago. I think there are just new opportunities that are ripe for exploration, like Web3 and blockchain, that I think potentially level the playing field in terms of access to really scale opportunity there. That's a whole other conversation. And then obviously folks like Zanetta and programs are being launched, funds being launched every day because of founders that have kind of gone through that life cycle and coming back and now beginning to create their own programs, start their own funds, and that's huge to the continual growth of this ecosystem of underrepresented founders. Yeah.
I know one other thing we haven't really discussed too. Like, it's not just about supporting. It's not just about supporting founders, right? It's employees, right? And companies like Accenture and AWS and big corporations, the better diversity they get towards the top of the organization, the easier it is for founders to start other businesses, right? They have resources now. They've made some money. They have, a parachute if they need it, and it's so much easier to jump out of those jobs and start new companies, right? Like so much innovation and venture-backed businesses start from senior people in other organizations. So I think that's changing faster which is great. So that should be a follow-on. We'll see, but I think that's also super critical.
Okay, well, Dejan, I'll leave this final word with you before we open up for questions.
Yeah, I would say, great changes in the ecosystem that are happening right now. I know in our report, which will probably get sent up, there was an astronomical number, like 1.2 trillion would be needed to close the funding gap between Black founders and non-Black founders. That sounds like a lot of money, right? It is a lot of money. But even just thinking post George Floyd, how much money was committed to racial inequity, entrepreneurship, supporting Black BIPOC individuals? Like 25 billion. Even if that amount of money was deployed over the next 5 years to entrepreneurs of color, that can help start closing that gap at an accelerated rate. So I think obviously some things need to happen from a policy perspective, and just knowing what are the best sources to fund this capital to. But I think a lot of great things are happening. And then for any entrepreneurs that are out there in the audience, keep pushing forward and moving. It's really interesting, I think, again, to the privileged information. I'm working with a Black female founder right now who is licensing technology from Northwestern University, because a lot of things people forget about universities. Great for talent, but also great for intellectual property. If you don't even have a business idea, but you are a good commercial individual, this woman is taking technology from Northwestern around the development of synthetic melanin, and she's commercializing it to create the first biomatched hair dye. Hair dye, as you all know, has not been innovated since 1914, since some L'Oreal chemist, and she is about to crush it right now. But even that, she's like, I've worked in beauty, but I didn't really have any ideas, but I went to Northwestern, they're about to give her $150K. So I think even just tapping into some of these other places that we don't necessarily think about to get ideas to start businesses, because that's my main thing in the future. I want us in all avenues. Let's get in space tech, let's make sure we're in cybersecurity, in supply chain, all these places where venture capital funding is being deployed, because to your point with the 1%, if we're only operating in certain verticals, that's going to continue to happen. But if we're operating in every vertical, there's no reason why at the end of the day, regardless of your race, color, creed, or gender identity, that you shouldn't be getting your proportional slice of the VC pie. We just need more of a spread across these areas.
Great, thank you for that. All right, so we're going to take some questions, and I see this gentleman with the hat in the back with the hand up. Again, if you can send your questions that you ask to ask at accessmo.org, and we can create a running list of all the questions that are being asked, and we can share with the broader community. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I believe, David, you were talking about there's a disparity between the language that Black founders and founders of color use and the language that venture capitalists expect. Can you give us maybe a quick top 5 of the biggest language disparities that you see, or the biggest frameworks? And also, I think Melissa, you mentioned a book, and I must have missed it.
Yeah.
Venture deals.
So the book is called Venture Deals, written by Jason Mendelson and Brad Feld. It's a great book. The first time I read that book, I'm like, why the hell didn't anyone ever tell me this stuff when I was starting my first couple of companies? Because it was so enlightening. I don't know if I can give you the top 5, but what I'll say is you need to start thinking about venture capital if you're going to raise venture. And Melissa brought up a great point where your business might not be right for venture, but if you're going to raise venture, understand your audience, right? And understand what their goals are and how they work and what matters to them and what their motivations are and how they think through things, right? So what are the business metrics that matter to them? What kind of return do they need to see? What stage do they invest? What industries do they invest in, right? Every fund is different. So a lot of mistakes that early founders make, and especially founders of color, just because they haven't had the access to the information, is they think if they have a good business, everyone should invest. Like, why aren't you investing? Like, this is a great business. And they forget that investors look for very specific things, not as a generality, but specifically to how they invest. Whether it's stage or sector or industry or what kind of stuff they're looking, what kind of return they demand. Right, so understanding your audience is really critical, and there's a lot of good resources to understand how venture capital works. Venture Deals is the best way to start, right? But you really need to think of them as a target customer and say, look, just like I'm trying to get a different customer in my company, like I need to understand their pain, I need to understand their drivers. So like I'll give you an example. At Massive, we don't do pre-seed or early seed investing. We get pitches all day long through our website from pre-seed and seed rounds. They've never taken the time to understand how we invest. we're very specific. These are the industries we invest in. This is the stage we engage, right? So it's a real challenge to understand your target audience and be able to speak their language. So the best place to start is venture deals. And then there's a lot of other good resources online, just understanding how venture works and practice, right? One of the best things early founders could do is just pitch people. Pitch an investor, say, hey, I'm just trying to get my pitch together. Do you mind if we run through it? And get real input from them, and don't be offended by the feedback, because they're not trying to hurt you. They're just giving you their thoughts and perspectives. So take it all in and say, hey, oh, this didn't connect at all. This was wrong, right? And it's a very iterative process. And that's why numbers are important, right? So I know Techstars is a lot. It's a numbers game. You keep pitching, you get better and you get better. But it's not about getting every investor to say yes. It's about getting the right investor to say yes. Someone that believes in what you're doing, someone that understands the stage, that can help you. Right? Because as soon as you take venture capital, it's like getting married, but you can't get divorced. So you better like those people. They better be aligned with your vision. They better be good long-term partners. We tend to get too blinded. I just want the check. And now you've got really shitty people on your cap table.
We got a
So-
couple more minutes.
Sorry,
Another
I
question?
babble. I apologize.
Over here, right behind you, second row.
Yeah, so that's been my experience, and I appreciate what you guys have shared. As a black founder, I don't want to say it's unique overall. We have a fintech loan origination platform where we have committed capital of about $500 million from institutions. I own the code through our LOS and different things like that. $750,000 of my own capital in it. I got some people from the industry, friends and family, I'll call them, that came in with another, 200, 250. So right now I'm at that next stage. And what I've found is a couple of things that you guys said. Typically when I'm reaching out to these funds or these firms, I don't know, but when I reach out to the black firms, they have a very myopic view on their funds. So when I reached out to a Harlem Capital, because KKR was one of their LPs that has a portfolio company like mine, their target was totally different, which limits me even more. And then, the white firms, it's basically an email. You go to their website, there's a form, and what I've typically been told is that you need to know someone within these industries. And I'm talking to NCTF right now, and the process they're putting me in, they don't necessarily understand a fintech loan origination platform with rates from 8.99 to 17.99, and so there's a lack of understanding. I say that to say, with you guys on this panel, is there anybody up here that I can email, that I can talk to, that can give me some leads, some people that you may know, and you specifically with Accenture, 780,000, you guys want to be, agnostic to industry. I know there's banks, we pretty much sit on the front face of banks now with our fintech because we have recurring revenue. Is there a way that we can contact you guys, not to necessarily pitch, but just say, hey, here's my business. I've done all the decks, I got all my, my valuations, all of that pre, post, and all of that. But for you guys to scrutinize me and say, okay, here's what you're doing wrong, or here's where I can lead you. Because over the last year, when I'm talking to investors, I'm like, there's been $10 billion of roll-up in my specific industry, with Goldman Sachs leading a $2.2 billion or $2.6 billion acquisition. So I know I got long-winded, but is there a way that I can reach out to all five of you?
Yes.
Yes.
The answer is yes.
And
I'll
will you guys
facilitate that.
return? Will you pick up my call or respond to my emails?
Yes.
Because that's what
100%.
happens to me a lot of times.
Yes.
I get the nods and I'm 45, so I've been an entrepreneur since I was 21.
Yeah.
So
I
forgive
think
my
you
blunt.
said, I think it says Russell on your tag?
Yes.
Come see me. Yes.
I will.
The answer is yes.
Thank you.
All right. Sir, you had a question?
Yeah, it kind of touches back to what you guys were saying up front, and my gentleman in the back also, as well as you too. The language barrier in regards to white versus black in the VC space, right? But then I also heard Melissa and David kind of talk about the difference of what we have to bring to the table in order to pitch as not quote unquote being prepared, but somebody in the white community can bring just a presentation day. Now I've been on both sides where I've been able to raise money off of a pitch deck. I've also been able to raise money off of my and stuff like that. But I guess my question is there somebody, or is there more people specifically like you that can say, or go to these, black-owned funds or these black founders and say, I understand because like you guys haven't been thoroughly educated. Here's what you need to do when speaking to these VCs, because these are a baseline of what they're looking for and what they expect when somebody like me comes to the table to talk to them versus somebody like yourself.
So this is specifically what programs like the one that I run at Techstars is about, right? We say, first thing, founder, you have to be the expert in your customer, and no one really cares about your technology. We care about your story. So tell us the story, tell us your why, but then walk us through team, TAM, technology, timing, traction. And it's all the information that you already have and you inherently know about your business, but it's being able to package it properly for the person who's trying to digest it, who's the VC. So Techstars does this. Access Mode has services that, they help founders with this. Accenture has tons of resources. AWS does this. David hears tons and tons of pitches and could probably give that feedback. So I think the info's out there.
But my mobile application, and I have a platform like Full Scale Marketplace that's utilized AWS for storage. So
Let's not.
absolutely.
And find other founders too. Like there's other founders out there that have raised capital, whatever they look like. It doesn't have to just be black founders. Like find other founders that have raised capital and have been pitching VCs and understand their language and say, dude, like, help me out here. Like,
Yeah, I mean, personally, like for me, like I had an apprentice that's been 40 years out in Silicon Valley, so like he's been very vital and intricate in helping me create the right pitch deck for the VC. Because there is a specific way that venture capitalists and the white community are looking at us and our, and our information that we're relaying to you guys. So, and in that, and then as well as, of course, having your financials and forecasting shadowed out to a certain year. Like he's been very, instrumental in that. He's a person of good color, but he's like, there's just not enough of us that are willing to, jump into those type of arenas with, fellow black founders, fellow black entrepreneurs, black women and men who are in charge of VC funds. And, so it's just like the language barrier is one thing, but it's also, well, why is it that we have to be so prepared, which I don't have a problem with, like I can down to the science on my particular project, but why is it that, we have to jump through so many hoops in order to get, just a certain amount of dollar, which is usually less than what, like you said earlier.
but you know the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, I know the answer, but it's just like.
It sucks, but you know the
It
answer.
does, but if we're saying that we're seeing a change and, white America is saying that, we're just waiting for the right people or we can't find them. Or, I think some of that is BS because it's like.
A lot of it's
There's a
business.
lot of us out there, right? And it's like, you might say that and then I send you an email and it's like him, like,
Yeah.
I may not get a response, but I may get a response that says, well, you need X, Y, and Z still. And it's like, well, I still have X, Y, and Z, but okay, I can.
Yeah, I think the best thing I can say to respond to that is to realize that investors are all different, just like founders. And your goal is not to get every investor to say yes. Your goal is to find the right investor to say yes. And that's a really hard process for any founder, even harder for founders of color. But this is like a search, and I need to find the right person that understands me, that understands my business, that's going to put money into it, and understand that most of those meetings, and by the way, this is true for any founder regardless of color, most meetings end in a no. That's just how it works. So your goal is to find the right investor, and it's harder as a founder of color because the inherent bias and the racism in the system, like you have to work harder, but it's getting better.
We have one more question. Oh.
Sorry.
One quick thing, one other thing that some of our founders have been going through as well. So yes, understanding your business, your TAM, your team, all that good stuff. venture deals, all that, I think is definitely great. Some of our founders have actually done other things looking at Plexo Capital and understanding truly how a GP has to operate, who runs the fund. So that, to his point, when you're trying to find the right investor for your right business, if I know this GP has a $30 million fund for metaverse, they're only going to be making 30 investments over the next 4 years, and they need this, then you can couple that with what you're building to say, yes, I'm going to be in the 20% of your portfolio that's actually going to return your fund. And I think that's the other piece. Like, yes, definitely know your business, understand how venture deals are structured at a high level, but then also just understand from a GP's perspective, how do they structure their fund? What is their investment strategy? What stage they're at? So when you go in with that ammunition and that data, and to your point, the language, I think that's the piece right there. Just even taking the extra step, twice as hard, get half as much. But even just knowing fully how that GP has to operate and how you're going to fit into their portfolio is that extra piece of care that I think might help with the language barrier.
Jeff?
Been time for this week. So I'm half Mexican, half German. I grew up as a kid going to a white Catholic church and a Mexican Catholic church. The Mexican Catholic church, it was louder. You had kids crying. It was part of the culture. It was just a little bit more rowdy than my white Catholic church. I say that to say that we need more events. We need to create more events. We need to have more dialogue. That when I go to typical events, they're panel discussions, but they don't have to be. So let's create more events where we have more conversation, talk more in our own natural turn, and then assimilate into panel discussions and bridge events and the same kind of stuff. But let's create more events where you can talk freely ideate, connect more with other people. I host a monthly event that's very similar to Denver Startup Week. It's monthly in the Santa Fe Arts District. I invite anybody to come, be a speaker, host panel discussions, do it in your own natural way. Let's create more conversation. The more conversation we have, language doesn't matter. After a while, if we're meeting and we're innovating ideas, then we can connect to networks. A good idea is a good idea, but we need to get more involved and have more conversation. So I invite you.
What's the name of the monthly event?
It's Tech Alley Denver. It's the third Friday of every month. It's free. I pay for coffee and lunch, so come on out, lead a session, talk about the things that matter to you guys, to anybody. You invite anybody to create their own topic and bring people together so that we can come together as a community.
Thank you, Joe. Yes, last question,
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah, it's a quick one. I was just textured digital platform for textured hair. Crown Hunt is our business, and one of the things I found is that when we're pitching VCs that are white guys, their lack of intuition about the size of that opportunity, about that market, is one of the big blockers we run into. And I just want any quick ideas on how do you overcome that with a VC where they don't have an intuition about the size of the market, and then even you have a slide with the numbers on it, all that sort of stuff. But I was just curious if there was any quick tips on that.
So I have an incredible founder who's going through the program right now and has an awesome product that helps with menopausal and feminine health. It's called Private Packs, and she had a very similar journey. Early in her stage, she's like, this is an issue that over half of the population is going to experience. This is a real and known issue, and yet I'm talking to investors who don't understand the market opportunity. And I say that to say that there are multiple paths to move forward, right? So if venture capitalists aren't the one who are going to give you that first leg up, there are corporate venture programs. So there's the Walmart and Target accelerator. So looking at some of your retail partners, for example, look at the big strongholds within your industry, because they too are heavily invested and interested in innovation within their industry. It helps them better know and connect with their end customers.
With that, we are going to wrap. I want to thank my panelists for coming in from out of town to be here to have this important conversation. So can we give them a round of applause? Questions if you have them, but please make sure the questions that you ask end up on accessmode.org so that we can make sure we have that running collection and continue this conversation and keep building community. And for those of you who are staying around Denver Startup Week till Thursday, we are having a happy hour in conjunction with NCTF, New Community Transformation Fund. And you can get the information from Arias, who raised your hand. That'll be Thursday at 6 o'clock, so she will help you register for that event, but make sure you register if you plan to come. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.